Welcome to Forum 360. I am Mark Welfley, and thank you for joining us for our global outlook with a local view. How many times have you heard the phrase, "No one knows what the future holds"? Well, today, we are going to try to predict the future. We will stare into our crystal ball with the help of two guests, and they are Dr. Alexa Fox, Associate Professor, the Department of Marketing at the University of Akron, and Dr. Joe Fox, Assistant Professor, Entrepreneurship Director of the Fitzgerald Institute for Entrepreneurial Studies in the Department of Management at the University of Akron. Yes, Dr. Alexa Fox and Dr. Joe Fox are married, so you can imagine their conversations and predictions they make to each other around the dinner table. Today, each will make two bold predictions for 2024, and we'll talk about these predictions. So Dr. Fox and Dr. Fox, welcome.
Thanks very much.
Start, if you would, by sharing a little bit about your backgrounds and how you got to be where you are here today, and your interest in kind of making predictions.
Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here, and we are glad to represent the University of Akron. I am a proud two-time alumna of the university, and also it's such a pleasure for me to be on faculty. I teach classes like consumer behavior, social media marketing, and digital marketing. So for me to be able to center some predictions around technology and the way that consumers interact with companies through that technology, it's really a pleasure, and definitely corresponds well with my research interests as well. I look at how companies and consumers interact through the internet and social media, what it means for having access to all of that information at your fingertips. And I also do a lot of research in online privacy, specifically about children's online privacy and what it means for kids as they grow up in this internet era.
Sure. Looking forward to your predictions.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Joe.
thanks again for having us. We really appreciate it. So I'm an assistant professor of entrepreneurship in our Department of Management and the director of our Fitzgerald Institute for Entrepreneurial Studies. Had a deep background in technology, not just from an academic perspective, but from a work perspective as well. Been really surrounded by technology from an entrepreneurial aspect my entire life, growing up in an environment where my dad ran an electronics manufacturing business, so I knew what a circuit board was at a very young age. And was exposed to a lot of things related to the dot-com boom and bust and all the other technological changes that we've seen. So I'm happy to come here and talk about some of the things related to artificial intelligence. It's certainly captured the attention of many in popular press and media, but also from a corporate and enterprise perspective, and what that means that we have all these different types of models that we hear about, and really where's the meat of what they can do, and versus what's the magic trick. And I think that's going to be the challenge in continuously making predictions, because when we look at the history of making predictions about artificial intelligence in particular, it's littered with a lot of things that are wrong and timelines that keep moving forward. So it's a really interesting kind of topical area, and thanks for letting us be a part of it today.
Yeah, thanks. Looking forward to your AI predictions. Okay, so let's get into those predictions, and we'll start with Dr. Alexa Fox. Your first prediction is social media platforms are trying to become more of a central hub for everyday activities. So
Yes.
explain that to us.
Sure. So there's going to be more emphasis on how social media platforms are not just for connecting with each other and for posting photos and engaging the way that we're used to. Social media companies are really trying to make sure that there's an opportunity for an enhanced opportunity for social e-commerce as well. So in other words, instead of purchasing on a separate website for your company, being able to have all those experiences right there within the social media app, that you'd be able to perhaps see an ad for something, show interest in it, make the purchase, all without leaving whatever app it is that you're using. And so that in-app shopping experience, because so many people are using social media these days through the app, is going to make it really so that so many more of our regular activities start to occur in that platform as well. It's also going to show, we've seen a growth to the extent of mobile e-commerce. It kind of really dovetails nicely with that. We've seen a growth in mobile e-commerce to the extent that it's really going to capture about 50% of e-commerce by the year 2027. So it's going to be just as important to have the experience optimized for mobile users as it is for a desktop user. On top of that, Gen Z is going to grow to be a big purchasing power source, and so we're going to see those buyers really increase as we move forward as well. In addition to that experience of social e-commerce, we're going to also see that disseminating information is going to continue, from whether it's politics, worldwide news, so it's not just, again, that emphasis on people being together, but being able to see social media platforms as this source for where we get our information is going to continue to grow in this time as well. We're also even going to see a growth for, a lot of times I think when we hear some of these names of these platforms like Facebook and Instagram, we think of very B2C focused markets. We're going to see a growth for B2B as well. HubSpot and TikTok actually just announced a partnership where you'll be able to track ads that are seen by a user on TikTok all the way through that funnel, through the CRM integration that they're going to offer. And they're really hoping that this will be something that, given HubSpot's very intense B2B customer base, that this is going to be something that could really ramp up the B2B relevance on a platform like TikTok, which is certainly not necessarily thought of in that way at this point. So there's a few other ways that I think it'll also continue to encompass a central hub for a lot of different activities, even becoming more of a payment source or a banking source. This is something that X has its sights set on for the future. So they would want it to be not just interactive from the sense of posts back and forth, but again, messaging, banking, payments. Even we're seeing Apple Pay is kind of going through this right now as well. So they're offering an Apple Pay Later coming down the pipe through Apple Wallet, where you'll be able to make a purchase for something, but be able to make payments and installments on it later. So all of these different experiences are going to change the way we really see social media platforms as being something to communicate with each other, to really expanding it to have more opportunities to interact in different ways in the future as well.
Sure, very interesting. So the question that comes to mind is, these social media platforms have been out and around for years. Like, why only now are they getting to this kind of monetary focus? Why wasn't this done like part of their initial business plan in the first couple of years out, like with Meta and X and others?
I think the way that things have changed in order to be able to have connectivity that is reliable first and foremost, and also the trend towards the mobile experience. Now, like I said, so many people use this mobily that I think everyone's used to kind of doing a lot of these things on their phone. And that wasn't maybe the case in the early years, nearly 20 years ago now, for Facebook, let's say. And I think in addition to that, there's a lot of opportunity for to see what works, and to kind of see that there are business opportunities on these platforms, which was not the original intention or the way people used it. So there's been a lot that's changed in those years since the beginning of some of these platforms, which have now had almost a 2-decade tenure in the minds of everybody here in America and across the world.
Thank you for that question. Okay, Dr. Joe Fox, let's go to you here. Your first prediction is vendors and large companies will play a big role in business-centric AI adoption.
Sure. Yeah, and so this,
on that.
Yeah, this one's interesting because as we look at AI, we have the pop culture and the media portrayal of artificial intelligence most of the time in reference to things like ChatGPT. And then we have this opposite end of the spectrum, much like Alexa talking about, B2C versus B2B. We have this enterprise level integration of artificial intelligence and what some of these new advances in things like large language models or multimodal models mean for a business, not just a large company, but a small company. But what we see with many of the vendors and the large enterprises out there is that they have their own research efforts underway or their own model development underway to actually create models that work with the data and in the environments that they have domain expertise in. So I'll give you a few examples of this. If we look at Salesforce as an example, they were an early enterprise that actually rolled out a variety of large language model-based capabilities to different customers that they have, utilizing some of the power of large language modeling on and layered over the customer data that someone already is using within Salesforce. So for a provider like that to develop their own internal types of models and to base it on that data that they've specialized in collecting and understanding some of the nuanced relationships between, it puts them in a different position than some smaller organization trying to build up some generalizable model and use it across a wide variety of tasks. So we see that ability for the larger enterprise. They have access to a wide depth and breadth of data, and they have all kinds of these different tasks they can train things on. So they have some of the capabilities from that perspective to develop things that may work in a variety of contexts, specifically for those different functional areas that they're important for. But with that, we have another interesting kind of area looking at this is because we have companies that are developing both closed and open source offerings. If you look at a very popular way to discover open source different AI models, not just language models, Hugging Face is a very popular organization to host those models. And going back to the example of Salesforce, they have almost at last count about 100 models that are hosted on there. So not only are they rolling this out to customers of Salesforce, but they are also releasing that back into a community for different places to build and layer onto that. So it creates this kind of interesting dyad where you have these organizations that have the research capacity and capability to build their own models, yet they also are releasing these to customers and other developers. And so it's created this wild west of competition for some of these different models that are available, and it's an exciting area, but also one of those areas that you're hoping you're choosing the right partner as an enterprise that's trying to socialize some kind of AI into your organization.
Sure. Interesting. If you're just joining us, thank you for joining us. We are here with Dr. Joe Fox and Dr. Alexa Fox, both from the University of Akron. And Dr. Alexa Fox is in the Department of Marketing, and Dr. Joe Fox is in the Department of Management. We're having a conversation about predictions for 2024. They have come up with 4 predictions for the year 2024. And so we've been through 2 of them, and now we're on to our third. So we'll turn to you, Dr. Alexa Fox. Your second prediction is that data privacy will increasingly be top of mind and continue to be scrutinized by consumers.
Yes.
Yeah.
So specifically, I'm going to kind of focus on the American outlook for this. It's an interesting one because Americans tend to feel uneasy and uncertain in a lot of ways about their personal data, and they feel that they have little control over how it's used. And so many people might be trying to make the right decisions when it comes to their information they share online, maybe personally identifiable information online especially. But recently we've seen that a lot of people are actually very skeptical about whether this will actually make a difference, that taking the right actions makes less of a difference these days because it's maybe harder to control exactly where that information goes. So the other challenge is that many people feel privacy policies in their current format, very long, lengthy paragraphs of information that can be very difficult for the average person to understand. Many people feel that these are not very effective ways to control information flow about somebody. So we have these challenges about how people feel, this unease and this uncertainty. And then coupled with that, there's this idea of who's responsible to protect this data. And interestingly, there is concern over how it should work, that if it's your own responsibility as an individual, if the government should be involved and to what extent they should be involved to help protect that personally identifiable information. But also companies, especially social media companies, going back to the original prediction, especially as they have more opportunities to interact in various areas of our life, there's a lot of lack of understanding as to what is happening with that information, the way that companies use it, control it, protect it, and again, same with the government. So there's kind of all these different pieces that there's varied views on, and people, I think, are going to continue to see a lot of ways that it could get more fuzzy rather than clearer.
Sure. For parents watching out there in this wild world scenario that both of you have been presenting, what do you recommend insofar as data privacy for parents? Like, what tack should they take? Where should they start? What should they say to whom?
You're right, it is like the Wild West, and I think in some ways, especially when it comes to children on the internet. Protecting children on the internet has become, in the last year or so especially, really highlighted in the media. There's been a lot more discussions about what should be done, maybe not just at a federal level, but states have been competing for the opportunity to try to make some sort of policy or some sort of regulation related to it. And many parents are concerned about, for example, what a social media platform knows about their children, what kind of information they have. Many do say they would appreciate some of that government support, but that tech companies should also be held increasingly accountable. But parents really need to come in and try to get their arms around something that can otherwise be very difficult to. And I think that's really the challenge is, sometimes parents say, there's just too much information for me to keep track of, and I don't know how I'm going to contain all of this. So I think being able to have, if a child is old enough and they're the ones using the internet, to be able to have conversations about their behavior is going to be a really important first step. If a child's young and maybe is using it in a supervised way, to be able to have those conversations at an age-appropriate way along the way, and to be able to really try to stay as involved as you can and as up-to-date as you can, even though, like I said, it can be difficult given the nature of how quickly things change. So to the extent that other decision makers, other entities, like the companies themselves that are responsible for creating these platforms, can take some responsibility and also be able to educate parents and children about the best ways to use the platforms, it's really going to be very important moving forward.
Yeah. A lot of shifting sands, as you say.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. So, Joe, let's go to your second prediction, and that is the proliferation of multimodal AI models, AI agents, and tool using AI models are going to raise new questions and concerns.
Sure. Yeah, thank you.
Sounds like that's pretty true.
And this is, it's interesting because we see, again, going back to what we see in popular portrayals of AI, we see this loading of AI as just large language models. That's certainly not true. There have been researchers working in the field of AI for decades on all these different types of artificial intelligent models, from things that are just text input and text output like we commonly see. We also see a lot of people using text input to image output, but there's plenty of firms that are also using different types of modality as input and output. So imagine a model that's fed an audio file that can generate an entire movie based off of that in some way. So we have research groups that are working on these types of models, and notoriously they're in types of systems that can be hard to explain why the output is the way that it is. And so this provides us with a long string of questions. And as we look at things like compliance, we look at things like combating some of the cons of using such systems, it's going to be harder to do so. And this starts stretching into some of the other discussions about how can we detect if something was generated by AI? How can we detect if something, if the AI did something we didn't want it to do? Because when we talk about things like AI agents or AI that has access to tools, we have many of these cases where we've provided some level of agency to an artificially intelligent system, and if we give it access to these different types of tools, we don't always know what's going to happen from that based on how reasoning works within one of those systems or how it doesn't work And so I've seen hackathons where the first task for a team is to actually, who can have a system set up that orders a pizza and delivers it here first. So they have to build AI systems that can make that phone call, can use that credit card, but to actually give it the agency of making a purchase, that's a whole nother ball game when you have employees doing that and understanding the way the system makes a decision to get to some certain way. And this touches a lot on compliance and regulatory issues, especially if we're using systems to determine anything related to a customer or related to some other user, where we've got to be really sure when we deploy a system like that into the wild, we're understanding how did it get to this output or conclusion based on the input we provided.
All those movies from some years ago that making predictions about all the things that are going to happen in AI are now kind of coming true.
Yeah.
Right? The follow-up question I have for you is I'd like you to put your looking glasses on and stare 10 years into the future and tell me, if you can, what AI is going to look like, feel like, I mean, what's the world going to be like? What's the impact in 10 years that AI is going to have?
I mean, I think we're going to see a big fading away of the part that's really a big media portrayal of it or a big deal, and it fades a little bit into the background. We're going to see more of that latent application. You see this with some operating system developers like Microsoft talking about the semantic kernel, where they use things like large language models as a basis to do a lot of other programming tasks and other tasks, but it's more of just naturalistic conversation with a computer, and it does far more tasks than it used to before. So I think that instead of it being all media portrayal or news story after news story about what AI has done, it becomes a naturalistic tool set that we're having defined set of interactions with. But the crystal ball, look at the rest of the AI landscape about predictions, and you'll see it littered with all kinds of things that are rendered true and untrue.
Sure. I'm not holding you to any of these
Sure.
predictions, but I really do like talking about them for sure. I have a friend of mine with a young child, and I was telling my young child I was going to be that young child that was going to be on talking to you, and he said, ask him this, why can't AI detect fake news? Can it?
It depends right now. At least what I'll say right now is detecting if text has been generated by artificial intelligence or not is going to be an incredibly fruitless task for at least the near future. There are some times where the way it's stated or output, that's the only way you can say it, right? And so that is very, very challenging. It is an academic issue. If you saw the recent executive order by President Biden, there's discussions about detecting if something has been generated by artificial intelligence and watermarking. Maybe in video and audio, there's going to be hidden signatures that are harder for nefarious actors to hide. Yet it still is going to be a challenge that may not be able to be detected solely based on another augmented system, at least in the near term.
Thanks. I'd like to go back to your first prediction, which was about social media becoming more an integral part of your life from which direction, kind of a spoke and hub. You're in the middle of the hub, and the spokes go out in all different directions. My question is, do you have any recommended social media platforms or browsers that you think are better, even marginally, than others? Or
Well, I think that also changes regularly as far as what features are available, the way data is handled, the way it's stored and shared. I think the big challenge there is to really consider the other something else I didn't get a chance to mention before, but I think is relevant now, which is that subscriptions to some of these social media platforms are also coming down the pipe, which offer features that could make the platform a little bit more useful, perhaps in some ways you have a better idea of how things are being shared or what kind of features are available to you that might make it more useful. So I think, although I don't ever really see a world where free access to social media is unavailable, I think it will always at some level be free. There are a lot of platforms now, not just the ones we hear about. We've heard of X's premium platform, YouTube is experimenting with it, Snapchat, et cetera, that will make maybe some of these things, the way information shared, the way that information is available or not, a little more useful to people who do have access to some of those those paid platforms, and the way now subscription models are just becoming more and more common for consumers to consume in other areas, this is going to be one of them too. So I think looking at not just what's available at the base level, but also kind of seeing when you're considering using or stopping to use a particular platform, seeing what some of these other options might be given the nature of some of the tiers and the paid platforms, I think is going to be something interesting that kind of changes the game as we move forward into 2024.
Yeah, thank you both. Malcolm X is quoted as saying, "The future belongs to those who prepare for it today." Jack Welch, former CEO of General Electric, famously said, "Control your destiny or someone else will." And my favorite, American inventor and engineer Charles Kettering once said, "My interest is in the future because I am going to spend the rest of my life there." Well, I'm not sure how much of our future can really be controlled. I think our power as ordinary citizens derives from our desire to understand and adapt to what comes our way. And I hope today's discussion has helped. I'd like to thank my two guests, Dr. Alexa Fox and Dr. Joe Fox, for being with us today and for your predictions, very interesting. And remind each of you at home to keep your mind open until next time on Forum 360.
Forum 360 is brought to you by John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, the Akron Community Foundation, Hudson Community Television, the Rubber City Radio Group, Shaw Jewish Community Center of Akron, Blue Green, Electric Impulse Communications, and Forum 360 supporters.